Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Rangers Gameplan Podcast, where we discuss what was, this time around, like the month that was the New York Rangers, but really, the entire story for this episode is going to be free agency, the different moves they made on the first day of free agency, the dormancy, and then today, just a couple of hours ago, the breaking news of K'Andre Miller re-signing a little extension. We have a lot to get into for this. There were a lot of moves made, and another couple of things that we can talk about that don't really have to do with free agency.
Yeah, I definitely didn't expect this many moves, considering how cap strapped they are. I guess first of all, I think the K'Andre Miller deal was absolutely perfect for the Rangers and for him. It's a perfect bridge deal. I guess at this point we kind of just have to hope that he looks more like the first half K'Andre Miller than the second half K'Andre Miller. I guess that's really all I have to say about him. The first half of last season, he was, we all thought he should have been an all-star. He wasn't terrible the second half, but there's no debating that he definitely struggled a little bit. And he didn't, show really anything close to what he was in the first half. So he obviously has that potential. I think what's scary is I think there's a very high chance that he obviously looks like he did in that first half and what we know he can be. Mm-hmm. And what's scary is, when it's time for his next payday, I think it's going to be pretty tough for this team to pull it off. So it's exciting for right now. We got him for a couple years. Obviously have to get, Alexi Lafreniere back. And I believe the Rangers have 2.3 mil left, somewhere around that range. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be tough. I mean, I not to say he's going to get any more than that, obviously, but I'm sure his agent is pushing for every penny that the Rangers have left. Yeah. So, if I had to guess, it would probably be 2 years for Laf. And it would, the numbers, it can go either way with it. Obviously, I don't think he's in a position to, go anywhere else. I think if he wanted out or anything like that, we would have heard about it by now. I think just give him a 2-year deal, somewhere around, 1.5 maybe. And just, there's no roadblocks in front of him anymore. So we'll see. I think the number on K'Andre was perfect to re-sign him back as well. And obviously the Rangers made a lot of moves outside of that. I guess the top two would obviously be, Blake Wheeler and Jonathan Quick. This goes without saying for most Rangers fans. I hate Jonathan Quick. I really do.
What could have happened?
I'm sure he's a nice guy. He was a Rangers fan, but he crushed all our hopes and dreams once upon a time. So, hopefully he just simply never allows a goal in a Ranger uniform and makes us all love him. But I think the more important one is definitely Blake Wheeler. He's a guy that's, he's pretty much a lock for 50 points a year, at least. And you got him for $800K. So I don't know how anybody could possibly be upset about that. And the other thing is, I think he is the perfect, if you want to call it a safety blanket, you can, because let's say, obviously, Lafreniere struggle, maybe not for the whole season, but at any point, Blake Wheeler is a guy that could very easily, slot into the second line and produce pretty well. And I also saw a stat that, Blake Wheeler in the past 3 or 4 seasons would have been 4th on the Rangers in 5v5 scoring. So it's definitely helpful. I hate it too. But I mean, it is what it is. And at least, we made a move to somewhat correct that. So that's definitely exciting. I think the one other one that I did want to talk about is Erik Gustafsson. Mm-hmm. I personally think that will end up being a huge steal for the Rangers. I think he has a lot of offensive upside. And he's a guy that, not only him, but all of the depth defense signings that they made, I feel like they're all guys that, worst come to worst, if Lindgren is out again or something happens, I feel like those are all guys that can, slot in and not be a disaster, which I feel like this team has had issues with for, the past few seasons. I mean, we've had guys, being called up and and as our sixth defenseman that have been, less than optimal, if you want to put it that way. I think we've all experienced many of the Libor Hayek, disaster classes and Patrick Nemeth and Ben Harper. We've been through a lot with the sixth defenseman on this team. So I think that, Drury made a lot of moves there to add depth and add competition, because I think it's going to, cause guys like Braden Schneider and Zach Jones to have to work a lot harder, because it's a lot harder to improve as a player, especially when you're developing, if there's nobody knocking at the door, so to speak.
Right.
If they feel comfortable in the lineup, it's really tough to get the most out of them. And Laviolette is a guy that he's definitely not afraid to make lineup changes like that. He's not afraid to take somebody out and put in a veteran guy or something like that, especially with the prospects. So I feel like it's going to bring the most out of those two. And speaking of Zach Jones real quick, and then I'll let you say your piece. I think it's interesting that Zach Jones, in his deal, it's a one-way deal. So if he doesn't make the Rangers, like the starting NHL lineup, he's no longer with the team. Mm-hmm. So they can't send him down or anything. So I think that puts a lot of pressure on him with the added fact that there's a whole lot of competition for that 6D spot. So I'm excited to see what we get out of him.
I'll start with the Keandre Miller thing briefly. I think the number is, I thought it was kind of a bargain. I thought 3.8 was a little bit below. I thought he could have easily gotten 4 or 4.5 was a number I thought was going to be closer to that. Mm-hmm. I will totally agree. I am terrified of what he's going to get in a couple of years, because the cap is going to go up pretty significantly in the next few seasons. And I think legitimately, and you guys, everyone cannot consider it as a current thing, that's going to be an $8 million defenseman in a couple of years, even if he doesn't progress the way he played this season and the way the cap is trending. I think that's going to be a $7 to $8 million defenseman, which is going to be a lot of fun to deal with down the line. So that's a bridge that you have to cross when you get there. But with him right now, just enjoy the 2 years you have guaranteed and figure it out from there. I was about to lose my shit at the Blake Wheeler deal. Like, I heard that was announced, and I'm just like, oh, God, what did they overpay for Blake Wheeler? And when I heard League Min, I was like, oh, Chris Drury is I genuinely, I'm not going to tell you that Blake Wheeler is some otherworldly player and, a Hart candidate, because he clearly isn't. But you're getting a 50, 60 goal, or point, not goal, point guy consistently for League Min. And he's going to be 37. He's still getting good time on ice. He still had 55 points last year. Like, for nothing, for practically free.
And just real quick, he would have been second on the team in points in the playoffs for the Rangers. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So
he played like 6 games. Wait.
Yeah.
They didn't even go to 7.
So I mean, it's and he's obviously a veteran in this league, and the one complaint that I've been seeing about people for him is obviously, he's an older guy, and I feel like a lot of Rangers fans think this team needs a little more speed. Mm-hmm. I don't know necessarily how much I agree with that, because the reason a lot of people are saying that is obviously they lost to the Devils, right?
Right.
But I mean, I can't bring myself to agree with the fact that they just got beat in a track race against the Devils. That's not what happened there. It's not like they just looked like they couldn't keep up or anything like that. We've talked about it since they got eliminated. It was just a complete dud from this team. They obviously have way more than what they showed against the Devils in the first round. 1,000%. And, to touch on that as well, it's, this is a team that's blown 2 straight 2-0 series leads in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So I think they need a little more veteran leadership more than speed, I would think. I think Wheeler and Nick Bonino are huge for that, because and the one other thing that I want to bring up, not only, the players having leadership, I think having Laviolette here for situations like that is huge. Like, I said it when we talked about it, when he got hired. I'm not trying to make it seem like he's the greatest coach of all time, but I think the difference in how do I put this? His interaction and involvement with the players, as opposed to Gallant, is a massive, massive change. And so I think, obviously Gallant was not the type of guy to give speeches or be super involved in the locker room. And I think when you have that, and you have any hockey team at any level that wins the first two games of a playoff series 5-1, then it's when there's nobody there to necessarily reel them back in from that high, we see what happens.
Yeah.
And the blown lead against Tampa was definitely way different because Tampa was just a better team. There's really no debating that. But I mean, like I said, I just think having some more veteran leadership and having a coach that will give a shit a little bit more is definitely gonna make a difference.
I would describe Gallant like Laviolette seems like he's definitely going to hold players more accountable, but he also seems far more personable to players. Like he's actually going to have conversations with them and actually understand who's on his bench. Whereas Gallant seemed like the type of person that would pass Zibanejad in the hallway and be like, "Good to see you, Mike." Like not even be like, "Wait a minute." Like, "Wait a minute.
Yeah.
What did he say?" Like, he gave that energy to me. And yeah, I did not leave the Devils series thinking, "Gosh, if they were just a little bit quicker, they would have won that." It was, if they would have had their heads out of their ass and not given up in games 3, 4, 5, and 7, they would have won it. There was no reason they shouldn't have walked over them. And against Tampa, the Rangers were the younger team. They were the faster team to Tampa. They lost because they understood how to win. They were also the better team, I will definitely say that. They lost because they didn't know how to go deeper into the playoff run. I think veteran leadership, and granted, Winnipeg isn't exactly where you're looking for deep playoff runs out of Blake Wheeler, but he's gone as deep as anyone else has on this team in the last couple of seasons. I almost made a oopsie daisy there. I mean, Winnipeg got to the East or the Western Finals a couple seasons ago. Wheeler can do it. I like him. I like having that emergency for the top 6. I think obviously he's probably going to be third line to start with.
Most likely.
Yeah, I saw an interesting one with him with Kreider on the third line. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but that was one opinion that I saw, which was interesting.
Yeah, we'll definitely see how the lineup shakes out. I think at this point, as it currently stands, there's no roadblocks or anything in the way of Lafreniere right now, whatsoever. So I'd be absolutely shocked if they don't at least start the season in the top 6, and we just gotta hope they break out this year. I mean, that's pretty much it.
If they're not starting in the top 6 on opening night, something has gone catastrophically wrong in preseason.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. I like Blake Wheeler. I respect him as the player. Jesus Christ, if Lafreniere can't beat out Blake Wheeler on this team, not just on any team on this team that specifically is trying to cater to break him out, what has happened? What went wrong?
I just, here's the thing. Obviously, it's been a long time since the Rangers got eliminated. We've had a lot of time to reflect, and I think now we're all at a point where we could kind of just talk rationally rather than out of anger, or at least I could say that for myself. Obviously that sour taste is at least that, the sour taste is still in our mouths and everything. But I think, as it is right now, it's just a matter of this is definitely a very good team, right? There's no debating that. And the only thing that we need is just for, Lafreniere just to do the thing that they were drafted for. That's pretty much it. Now is their opportunity where they're going to have an opportunity to win over the ice time if they're not just going to be given it.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's no roadblocks there. Like this is at this point, there's absolutely no excuses anymore. And I'm confident they could pull it off, definitely, because I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit later. I don't see a world where Tarasenko is back or Patrick Kane. I really don't. I at this point, I mean, unless you trade Goodrow and you just give Tarasenko like 2 or 3 mil. There's just really there's no way, obviously, right? So I mean, even if he is there, you would definitely assume, either Lef or Kako or both get significant power play time.
Yeah.
So, all things considered, this is the year where it's got to happen. And this team has pretty much everything else. So much would be unlocked for this team if those two, do what they're anything close to their ceiling, really. I think for me, for both of them, is I gotta see at least 65 points, at least, or else it's really not. I mean, you would assume either one of them is going to be playing with, Mika Zibanejad or Artemi Panarin or what have you. Like there's really, I feel like I'm setting the bar kind of low there at that point. But that's the minimum that I have to see. I think, like I said, there's no roadblocks there that I'm not necessarily concerned about bringing anyone else, in at this point. I just. We gotta avoid having to trade for 2 or 3 guys every deadline, and the reason we've had to do that is because of those two not necessarily bringing enough to the table. Now, whether you think that's because of ice time or what have you, there's a whole lot of debate. There's 2 different sides to it. Some people are 1,000%, pro Lef and Kako and the kid line. I understand it, but regardless of anything. They're 40-point players as we currently sit here and talk about it. That's the fact of the matter. So, this is what 3rd and 4th years into the season for them, I believe. Yeah. So that's pretty much it, man. This is not anywhere close to when they were drafted. This is a long, pretty decent amount of time into their careers. So we got to start seeing that.
I cannot leave another season where my main takeaway as for young players on the team is, wow, Jimmy Vesey looked surprisingly good, huh? I cannot do it again. You're going, like, just from sheer numbers of who you have on the roster, they're both getting top 6 minutes. It's undebatable. They probably one is going to be on power play 1, and I think they should be. There is no reason whatsoever that you shouldn't. They're not, we call them kids because it's a funny, cute little nickname. They're not. This is going to be Kako's 4th season. He is bordering on vet of the league, or at least
approaching it for sure. Yeah.
Lafreniere, I understand that it's his 3rd year. He's a 1st overall pick. And I understand that when you're that highly drafted, there's going to be some unfair hopes put onto you. This isn't the fact that Lafreniere's come in and been consistently a 60-point player, but, he hasn't broken 100 points yet. What the hell is wrong with him? He hasn't broke 40. He hasn't scored 20 goals yet. I'm not putting these lofty requests on a guy like Lafreniere of, he hasn't won a Hart yet, so he's trash. No. He hasn't cracked 40, guys. He's not a half a point per game player yet. And he's gotten ice time. Yeah, sometimes it's with the kids line. He was getting ice time in the first part of the season last year with Mika Zibanejad, with Chris Kreider, with Artemi Panarin, and he still wasn't cutting the mustard that well. He looked better there than, when he was slugging it out with Gaudreau and Vesey, but it wasn't substantial enough that you're like, wow, he's a top 5 player on the team when he's with those guys, and bottom when he's not. It's not that. They're gonna have the ice time, and I will say, to circle back to some of the signings, or at least partially, because I think you mentioned it with Gustafsson, Bonino, what have you. One thing that I did like that the team did in free agency, I don't see anyone who I think, they're gonna, if they hit their floor, it's gonna be a liability. There's a lot of high floor guys that they went out and got. And I think that is to an extent Drury hedging his bet of I am not going to take these massive swings. I think Bonino could be solid. I think Gustafsson could be pretty darn good also. I think Wheeler could easily crack 50. I don't see anyone who I'm like, they're gonna, if it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said before, it's definitely very surprising they made as many moves as they did. But I just, apart from the guys that were clearly signed, to just be in Hartford and be called up if disaster happens. I mean, I also see a lot of people breaking down, the lesser moves as if they're actually significant. Do you know what has to go terribly, terribly, terribly wrong for all 9 of those players that we signed to be on this roster at any point in time? Do you understand what has to happen? Like, that's I don't care necessarily about those moves. I think, like you said, there's a lot of high ceiling moves with these guys, and not to make it seem like all these guys are going to be super, super, super impactful, but I think with the whole situation we had this year where we were playing shorthanded for like a fucking month straight, I think it would be helpful if you could maybe sit Adam Fox or Ryan Lindgren for like a game or two some nights, because there was a stretch where Adam Fox was playing 30 minutes a night for a month.
Yeah.
A month. And not only that, like, we didn't even have the correct amount of players on the roster playing in the games. So it was, like I said, like I was saying before, we've had a lot of time to reflect on this, and I know we were very, very excited going into the playoffs, right? But at the end of the day, this is a team that completely packed it in for the last, 2.5 months of the season, and half of it was because they didn't have enough players on the team purposely. So when you have that happening, and you have many, many games where, I mean, dude, they were going to overtime against the Flyers, the Habs, they were struggling against bottom dweller teams, So the reason I'm mentioning this is because it helps when you have depth that can slot into the lineup and not be terrible, and it also helps because I feel like like I was saying, there's a lot of change with the makeup of this team. And I just feel like you're going to have a lot of guys here that aren't necessarily going to put up with the lack of effort that we saw last year. Because I feel like last year, we keep saying it, Gallant had damn near no impact on this team. Absolutely none. So the vibes and the energy of the team and their mindset was completely handled by the players. And that's obviously not going to work. So you have a coach in here that's going to set them straight when he needs to. And I really would be shocked if a guy like Blake Wheeler is just going to, allow them to not try in a playoff game. Not to make it seem like he's Mark Messier or anything like that. No. I understand that. But this is a guy that's obviously very proven in this league. And he is a proven leader as well. He obviously got the captaincy stripped. But
that
you
is
have
the
to take
least of Winnipeg's problems that they've been running.
You have to. I was just gonna say that because you have to take that with a grain of salt because Winnipeg is one of the top, should I say, laughing stocks in the league right now. They're not Calgary level.
Disasters would be.
Yeah, nobody wants to be there. Blake Wheeler has said many, many times over the past 1 or 2 seasons that he does not want to be there. It's you know what I'm saying? It's they stripped the captaincy to make it seem like there was change happening internally. They were looking for different things that could be the problem that just simply weren't. I don't know how else to put it. This is a team that's basically imploding. Nobody wants to be there. Hellebuck doesn't want to be back. He has no interest in signing with them. You can't look at a guy and be like, oh, he got his captaincy stripped. People are trying to make it seem like he's going around and just fighting people in the locker room. That's not the case. They have an internal mess going on there.
I think it's funny that the same people that were talking about Trouba getting named captain that were like, oh, that's just a total, show. It doesn't mean anything, are the same ones that are like, oh, Wheeler had his captaincy stripped away.
Now all of a sudden people care.
It matters. Also, to dial back for a split second on that Adam Fox thing that you mentioned, I just have a fun little game for you. How many games this season do you think Adam Fox played over 25 minutes?
I'm gonna go with. I'm just gonna say 10.
31.
31?
31 games. He was on the ice for over 25 minutes.
Oh my god, that is insane. I didn't know that. The reason I said 10 is because I thought it all happened when the Kane
No.
stuff was happening. I
Oh,
did not know that. I had no idea.
there were 11 games where it was over 27. This
Yeah,
team
I mean,
was fun. This team.
and now we'll see what happens with Laviolette, right? Because who knows if that's going to happen again. Obviously Adam Fox he played pretty much as terrible as I've seen him play in that game 7. And I'm not trying to necessarily make excuses for that, but when you're playing that much, it's got to be tough. It's really got to be tough to go all the way to 7 games and feel fresh. It really, I would assume that's difficult. I know I don't play in the NHL, obviously, but if I had to put money on it, I would say that he thought that was pretty challenging to play that much in the regular season and be on a team that essentially wasn't trying, and be on a team that for the last 2 months he basically had like 15-second breaks in between shifts for 2.5 months. I think there's a little bit of slack to be given out for him. Like I said, I'm not trying to make excuses. I think the only player on this team that I will abstain from blame is obviously Igor. But I mean, come on, that is definitely a problem. I had no idea it was 31.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Also, one other stupid thing. For some reason, the name Adam is part of the pronunciation on Hockey Reference for Adam Fox, in case you couldn't read what that means.
Oh, yeah. Just in case anyone was confused.
Just
yeah.
in case you weren't sure.
Man. Yeah, I mean, just one last thing to say about him. Obviously, like I said, you want to keep him fresh. He is, you could make a very strong debate for him being the best defenseman in the league. Obviously, there's a little bit of bias that goes into that, but he is top 3, no doubt, right? So
he put up 72 points in a season that I felt was pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, he's pretty good, right? So I think if you keep him fresh, and obviously this is a playoff team, right? There's no way that they're not. If you have a guy like him, and you obviously have Igor, assuming that there's any improvement 5-on-5, and obviously assuming that anybody shows up in the playoffs, you got to feel like you have a shot every year. I mean, regardless of if you trade for, 7 first ballot Hall of Famers every year, like the core group that you have is capable of at least going very far in the playoffs. So, it obviously, like I said, very, very disappointing how things ended this year, but with the changes that are being made and hopefully, obviously, we keep guys a little more fresh and we don't have to, play with, 9 players for 2 months. I think things are gonna, go a lot smoother for this team. And especially, like I said, you have a security blanket. Obviously, not trying to be a Debbie Downer and say, we don't have faith in Lef and Kako breaking out. We have no idea what's going to happen yet. We still have a long time until the season starts. We have a long time until the line combinations come out. But you have Blake Wheeler that I would be shocked if he couldn't at least put up 50 points again, assuming that he plays on the second line for a few games here and there. I feel like the one other thing that I will say, obviously, the Rangers in the playoffs felt like it's just a collection of superstars. I am far from the first person to say that. I feel like the moves they made were the moves that they truly needed, obviously we needed, Tarasenko fit very well on this team. Did we need Patrick Kane? No, but we got him for damn near nothing. So it's not, you know what I'm saying? We talked about this when he was traded to this team.
It was a deal too good to pass up.
You have a guy that only wants to play for you, and the other team's GM is literally forced to hand him over to you. I still can't even remember what we gave up in that trade because it's so insignificant. So it's, like I said, it was very good on paper. Was it necessarily what this team needed? No, right? It just wasn't. I don't think this team was good enough on the boards last year whatsoever, and I think the moves they made definitely helped with that, especially a guy like Blake Wheeler. And Nick Bonino, for what he's worth, is definitely a very solid player. I think, obviously not trying to make it seem like Blake Wheeler and Nick Bonino are, the equivalent of getting McDavid and Draisaitl, but I just think they fit pretty well onto this team. They bring a lot of, intangibles and leadership onto the team, and I'm just excited to actually see where they slot into the lineup. I also think it was interesting if you listen to Drury's press conference after the trade deadline. He kind of made it seem like Nick Bonino was pretty much a lock for being on the fourth line this year.
Yeah.
So that also brings me to bring up Brendan Othman. I know I feel like there's no in between with him on this team, within the fan base. I think some people think he's going to be Brad Marchand, and then I think other people expect him to be a third or fourth line guy. I'm not quite sure what he's going to be. He wasn't necessarily playing in the best of leagues. I mean, the OHL is really not, obviously many NHL players have come from the OHL. I'm not trying to, say anything differently, but he had ridiculous numbers there, and it's one of those things where you have to take it with a grain of salt, right?
Right.
So many players will put up like 70 goals in the OHL, and then they don't even play 30 games in the NHL. So
yeah.
I'm not trying to say he's the bust or anything like that. What I'm trying to say is I truly don't know where he's at as a player, especially being that he wasn't allowed to play in the AHL last year. For whatever reason, the NHL has some sort of rule in place, or the OHL has some sort of rule in place where players a certain age can either only be in the OHL or the NHL.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like graduating like 8th grade and then just going straight to college. Like, it's weird. Like, there's no in between. I don't understand why that rule is in place, but last year was essentially like a wasted year of his development, because he was basically the best player in the OHL the year prior, and he was ready for that next step, and he wasn't allowed to, because it was either he went to the Rangers or back to the OHL, because he physically wasn't allowed to play in Hartford. Now he can. So I would definitely have him start with the Wolfpack for at least 20, 30 games and just see where he's at, because I don't see any use in rushing him. The only spot that he could possibly have on this lineup is the fourth line left wing, if he were to somehow win that out.
Yeah.
And at that point, how much is he really developing? So I would just put him on the first line in Hartford for 20, 30 games. If this team is struggling at any point, or if you feel like he's ready, at least you could feel comfortable in doing that. But just sending him straight to the NHL, I feel like is a very huge mistake, considering he'd be playing 8-9 minutes a night. It's essentially just as useless as him playing in the OHL was last year. So that's pretty much where I stand on him. Do I think he's a fantastic prospect? Honestly, no. Do I think he's going to be a solid NHL player? Yes, but I think most of the reason for that is a lot of his traits as a player. He's very good along the boards. He's very physical. He's good defensively. He's not necessarily, obviously, Connor Bedard offensively or anything. He doesn't necessarily have that too much. But a lot of his traits are, transferable to the NHL. I just don't think it should happen right away.
I'm very much with you on the put him in Hartford for a little bit. I feel like by game 50, he's probably going to be on the fourth line. And
I'm with that. I just it's so tough to compare a player that goes from the OHL to the NHL directly, because they're two. Obviously, it goes without saying, the competition is vastly different.
Oh,
so
yes.
Let him just get his confidence, right? Because if he were to be on the opening night lineup and let's say he goes 10 games without a point or something, his confidence is ruined. It's just, there's too much risk there. At least if you have him in Hartford and let's say he puts up 30 points in like 40 games or something, I feel like he'll feel a lot better about himself, rather than just going straight to the NHL and not necessarily being able to do anything right away, and then that stunts his confidence, development, all that. We've been through this a million times. This team is not good at developing. I just feel like this is your chance to actually do it right. So let's hope they do. Yeah.
Expectation is a gateway to reality, or a gateway to disappointment, not reality. Jesus Christ. I'm not high on Brennan Othman because, oh my god, he scored 50 goals and 97 points in the OHL. I'm high on him because there is enough offensive talent, and the way he plays is such a pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is just going to be a nightmare on the third or fourth line in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And down the stretch, back half, if you put him in Hartford and he looks good and you think genuinely he is ready, I think a fourth line of possibly Othman, Bonino, and Gaudreau, assuming he stays, could be just a pain in the ass for another team to go against. I don't think, obviously, if you put Othman there, you sort of lose the effect of that being a shutdown line because you're not going to be expecting a 21-year-old rookie to be going up against a team's top players to just stunt them. I don't have a lot of confidence in him matching up against a guy like, say, Draisaitl, if you're trying to shut down a team like the Oilers. But for a lot of teams, I think that's just going to be a pain in the ass to go against. And that gets me somewhat intrigued. I definitely don't think on opening night he should be skating out to center ice to salute the fans. That's a terrifying thought. And I think that's a great way to repeat the awesome pattern that this team is just renowned for of completely destroying players as they come through. But I have some hope. But again, my hope isn't that, he's going to be this unbelievable, 90-point scorer. I think he can be 50, 60. Very similar to like a Blake Wheeler type. 50, 60 points, solid middle six, awful along the boards. You don't like going against him, and so like I'm not expecting him to be a Panarin. I'm not expecting him to be a Zibanejad type player to get crazy points. I'm expecting him to be a solid annoyance. A good player that I'd put him with is Michael Bunting, someone in that sort of aspect.
Yeah, I think eventually once he's developed enough and he's put with the right players, he could definitely be a Michael Bunting type of player. Like I was saying before, I just at this current moment in time, I don't see a need for him on the team necessarily.
Yeah.
That it's not. Our issues are, we just need the top guys to play like it, and we're just hoping for Laff and Kako to break out. That's really it. I don't think you really have to move too many other parts around. I feel like at that point you're kind of just over fixing things, and like I said, there's just too much of a risk there for him specifically because I don't think anybody really thinks he's ready right now. It's not like this guy was ever a world-renowned prospect or anything like that.
No.
I'm not trying to undersell him. I do think he's going to end up being a pretty good player, but I just feel like I have seen that narrative so many times that people will essentially rage if he's not on the team right away, and I just don't understand it. Like, have we not learned? We've done this so many times.
Well,
and honestly, the other thing that I will mention, Tyler Pitlick is he's on a very cheap deal, just like everybody else we signed. I'm totally fine with having him on the team. Instead of Othman, he's great at killing penalties. He's a perfect fourth liner, and not to talk too much about it. Us as hockey fans with any NHL team, for whatever reason, we all like to gush over fourth line players for some reason. Like Tyler Mott is literally like Connor McDavid to Rangers fans for no reason. It is what it is. Like you just find solid fourth line players and hope they're not terrible, and that's pretty much it. I think they do have that pretty much set in place. Like if you could get any variation of Pitlick, Bonino, and Gaudreau on the fourth line, whether you want to swap one of them on opposite wings or whatever, what have you, I think that's perfectly fine. I don't necessarily think you have to change that. I feel like if you just force Othman in there on either wing, I feel like you're just doing too much at that point. And all of those guys are good at killing penalties, and they've been doing this forever. So I have no issue with that right now. The one other thing that I will mention, in terms of the draft, okay, Gabe Peralt, he's a very good player. Okay, now, like I was saying with Brendan Othman, of course it's very eye opening when he literally broke Austin Matthews' point record with the U.S. development team. I understand that, Do not rush him whatsoever. The reason he fell that far is because of his skating. It's really not that great. Okay. Um, like I was saying with Othman, you have to take a grain of salt when you look at those numbers because the U.S. development team is as close you can get to a literal all-star team at that level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've had lines with Jack Hughes on it. Like so many NHL players right now played for them. American-born NHL players. Like they have some really, really good teams year by year because it's essentially like the World Juniors team playing against like college, like D3 college teams. Like that's pretty much what it is. So, yeah, he had like 1,000,000 points in 50 games. I get it. You cannot rush him. I'm not expecting him to be anywhere near this team for at least like 2-3 years. Just let him play in college. He has so much upside. I'm honestly more excited about him than Othman. But like I said, I don't expect to see him for at least 2-3 years whatsoever. Hopefully, everything works completely smoothly and he hits his ceiling, which a lot of people think he can truly be an elite player in this league. But I don't care what his point total in college is this year. I just let him sit there for at least 2 seasons in college and let him play in the World Juniors and all that stuff. There's no need for players like that on this team right now. There's none because we're going to have that same debate where, that we've had with Laff and Kako about, oh, well, if they weren't on the third and fourth line for that long, they'd be a lot better. Just avoid that, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We keep saying this, that's totally not our issue right now. We just, this is obviously a playoff team. We know that. We're just asking for the top players to show up and for the kids to break out. That's it. That's we don't have to change anything else. That's pretty much it.
No, I disagree. If he doesn't come to the league in his first season at like 17 years old and score 100 points, I think he's a bust. I got to.
Yeah, if he doesn't actually beat Mika Zibanejad out for the number 1 center, I think we should just.
No,
get
I
rid
gotta
of him.
argue with you there, but no. One thing that I will say on your note, talking about Othman, talking about him, talking about mistakes this team has made with development and with everything, because God knows they've made a lot of mistakes recently.
Mm-hmm.
My trust with Drury is that he has not made the same mistake twice. He had a relatively conservative trade deadline, and it didn't work. Mm-hmm. And then he went out and had a very hyper-aggressive trade deadline. That did not work. He didn't go back to the boards and go throw all the money at only Tarasenko and Kane. That did not work. He made the lineup deeper, and he got a bunch of guys that are not going to bottom out and be unusable. At worst, they're guys that are going to keep the team floating. They're not going to go out there and be horrible liabilities. I have no fear of Nick Bonino, where he is meant to be. Obviously, if injuries stack up and he's playing with Panarin, then we're going to have an issue. But the issue isn't going to be Nick Bonino. It's going to be, oh my God, everyone's dead.
Yeah.
Guys like him, guys like Riley Nash, Pitlick, Quick, Wheeler, Gustafsson, they're moves that aren't going to sink you. And I like the fact that he hasn't made that mistake. He obviously tried to make Zach Jones be a thing. That didn't go well. I think he learned from that of, okay, I can't rush the development with these players who are, people want to see them. You feel good about them. There's confidence in the organization. He saw that it didn't work. I don't think he's going to make that same mistake again with a guy like Hoffman, with a guy like Perron. I think he's going to let them take their time. And I feel confident that he clearly has learned from mistakes that either he made or previous GMs, previous management portions of the Rangers have made the past few seasons, and isn't going to repeat them 50,000 times before he goes, maybe trading for multiple Hall of Famers at the deadline isn't the route to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, like I was saying before, obviously, last year's lineup was very, very awesome to look at on paper. It was for a while. It was almost every day when I would look at the lineup before the games, I would be in complete awe.
Yeah.
But was that necessarily what the team needed? And honestly, at that point, let's say we were to bring those guys back, we would just be having the same song and dance of we're not really sure where these guys should go to feel comfortable with each other. Like Panarin and Kane obviously didn't rekindle what they had in Chicago. Not to say I obviously They played somewhat decent together, but it's not, for a lot of it, we were just tossing around Kane, Tarasenko, Panarin, all these guys in different combinations, and you just have too many mouths to feed at that point.
Yeah.
I think you just let the top guys be in roles they're already comfortable in. Don't necessarily add anything to it. All you have to do is just ask them to be what they're supposed to be. And now I feel like you have a lot of secondary scoring. You have a lot of guys that could do, a lot of different things that this team didn't really have last year. I mean, there were a lot of finesse that, looking at the lineup last year, there was absolutely nobody on that team, or at least in the top 6, that was really, that grit and grind type of player.
Right.
I think as close you got to that was probably Capo Caco. I think, honestly, that might be the most impressive trait of his, is just how good he is on the boards and making plays on the boards. But other than that, everybody else in that lineup was trying to make the pretty pass. They couldn't do anything 5-on-5, especially in a playoff series, because they just didn't have anybody in the lineup that really played to that style that you need. So I think this lineup is a lot more of, it fits the team needs a lot more. Like you said, I'm not scared of any of these moves. As much as I liked Jaro Halak last year, if for any reason whoever the backup goalie is for the Rangers has to play a significant amount of time, obviously that means something to happen to Igor, at which point we are completely screwed. So I really don't care who they have as the backup goalie. I fans are going to complain no matter what, but I think Halak's probably going to get a decent amount of money. I don't think he's signed right now, if I'm not mistaken. So it's, obviously you don't really have to spend, $1 or $2 million to bring him back. If Jonathan Quick's going to come here on league minimum, I'm totally cool with that. That's pretty much it. Like, there's no move that Drury made that I'm really upset about. I think he just got a lot of guys that can contribute on any given night. Like, let's say you have to plug in Riley Nash or whoever on the third or fourth line for a night. Like, is it going to be disastrous to your team? No. And I think that specifically in the regular season, because like I was saying before, there's been a lot of players on this team or in this organization in recent years that you absolutely cringe seeing them in the lineup. And I don't have anyone that I could really say that about now. I obviously I'm not trying to make it seem like this is a perfect roster and nothing could possibly go wrong. But I'm just happy that I don't have to cringe about seeing Patrick Nemeth in a lineup, or I don't have to. I mean, we literally had Brendan Smith on as a forward on this team not very long ago. So it's this team is obviously as deep as it's been in this core of players. So, like we keep saying, there's really just one thing that we need to unlock this team. It's just the kids breaking out and just the top players doing their thing. That's it. Yeah. There's nothing else. There's nothing else that could possibly happen that I think would add anything to this team. You don't have. I mean, hopefully the cap goes up, in hopefully next year. But you don't have the money to necessarily bring in anything that would change the team significantly. So instead of trading for Hall of Famers, like you said, why not just bring in guys that can contribute to your team for absolutely as cheap as you could possibly get them? And, obviously we keep talking about Blake Wheeler. Like we keep saying, I'd be shocked if he just has a complete dud of a season. I know he's on the older side of things, but he's still got a lot of gas left in the tank. I mean, he just scored 50 points on a team he literally didn't want to play for. So I think he'll definitely be all right. The one other thing that I'm definitely intrigued about is just how the lines are going to shake up specifically with Trocheck and Hedl. I'm interested to see if Hedl truly takes that next step. I believe I've said it on here before. He is, and I truthfully mean this, like one of the streakiest players I've seen and for any of my favorite sports teams. Like truthfully, when he's on, he's unbelievable. But when he's not, he's really not noticeable. Like if he could find a way to be a solid player when he's not on these huge goal scoring streaks, I think that'd be huge for him. Like if he could just find it night by night, even if he's not necessarily putting up points every single night, to just have a consistent level of play. Because like I said, he's either scoring 2 goals a game or I don't notice him for the entire night. So if he could just figure out some type of middle ground when he's not on his, complete heaters, that would be huge. Huge for this team. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because I'm curious to see what happens with Chris Kreider. Being that there's a new coach in here, I don't know if he's going to be on the third line, I wouldn't be opposed to it. Obviously, he's put up a whole lot of goals the past 2 years. I understand that. But a lot of it's on the power play, right? So, and the one other thing that ties into that, I thought him and Trocheck were outstanding together in the short stint that they had as line mates. I would like to see that again.
Yeah.
So if Hedl takes that next step and you can put Trocheck on the second line, I think that this team is significantly better at that point, because I think, like I said, if Hedl takes that next step, he's been consistently taking those steps. If he could just crank it up one more notch, you put him with Panarin, and I feel like we'll see the best out of him that we've ever seen.
Yeah, I would love to see a Trocheck Kreider pairing, because they had the strangest chemistry I've ever seen. Like, I had never in my life, until they were playing legitimate minutes together, thought, you know who'd make a great duo?
Yeah,
Vincent Trocheck and Chris Kreider.
It never even crossed my mind.
But they looked great together last year. Like 5-on-5, they looked great together. They obviously, Kreider on the power play is unfair, but even 5-on-5, the two of them looked really nice together. I'd like to see that pairing. I don't know if that would push them down to a third line and put Hedl on a second one with Panarin possibly. There's a lot of shuffling around with the lines. I think the bottom line, not meaning the fourth line, whatever your decision is out of camp is the decision. I don't want another 82 games where every night the blender comes out. And you get to, 10 minutes left in the third period, you're losing by 2, and then all of a sudden, get ready, it's time for VC, Hedl, and Panarin on the first line.
Yeah.
Making why?
And the one thing, just to make both of us feel comfortable about that, I actually have been listening to a lot of people, reporters from the Capitals and whatnot, talk about Laviolette. He actually does have a pretty long leash with his line combinations, or at least from what I've heard. Yeah. So that definitely makes me feel better about a lot of things, because if I see line combinations that I like, and I think even if they're not fantastic right away, even if I feel as though they can build chemistry, I just want it to stay that way. Because there were so many times last season, and it's well documented by everybody, that we pretty much knew the lines that we wanted, and we'd see them for a split second and they were gone. So and when things would work, for a game or two, the second that they had an off night, we'd never see that combination again. So, obviously to build chemistry, and this is one of our main complaints. How are you supposed to win a playoff series when you don't know what your line mates are going to be 6 minutes from any given moment? It's very tough. So, and obviously there's been the rumors about the players, obviously wanting Gallant out in the exit interviews and stuff like that. So there's a lot of truth to that. So I'm just excited for hopefully having, consistent lineups for more than, a period.
Yeah.
I think that'll be very, huge for this team. Like there's really not a whole lot I can necessarily say other than what we have. I just think the mindset for this team is going to change, and like we keep saying, I hope we don't have another season where it just feels like they packed it in. Like we've said it before, the Rangers played last year like they just won the cup, and they acted like it, and I don't think that's necessarily going to be permitted under this new coaching staff. So I think with them actually trying every night, I think a lot of good is going to come out of it.
And I'm sure there's a little bit of bias. I've never seen a team across any league have such a hangover for winning absolutely nothing than the Rangers did this season. It wasn't even like they won the conference. They won nothing. They won a playoff series against the Penguins that they did not deserve to win.
Yeah, yeah.
And somehow, just through friendship and bullshit, won a series against the Canes. And they had the 2-0 lead against Tampa. The less said, the better. I've never seen a team win nothing and be that confident in themselves.
Yeah, yeah, and the one thing about that, like, obviously, this team has the pieces to win the cup, and they have the pieces to make a deep playoff run. I would just, the thing is that they also have the pieces to do it a lot cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just feels like for the past 2 years, like, no win has been easy. I mean, even in the most convincing wins of the past 2 years, like, you talk about that huge win over the Penguins late in the year, like, that game could have easily been 6-5 if Igor didn't play one of the best games I've ever seen him play.
Yeah.
Like, this team, but we keep talking about it. Like, if they could just unlock themselves 5-on-5, they will truly be a top 3-4 contender in the league. So, and like I said, they can absolutely win games in a much cleaner fashion. They could absolutely make things a lot stressful on themselves if obviously we feel like they have the right coach in place now. We like the lineup a little bit better. Like, they could absolutely get this thing done. I'm hoping that they can win games against the Flyers, by multiple goals rather than, winning it in overtime or struggling for most of the game. Like, they can absolutely do that. If you look at this roster, I don't see why you should be struggling against these teams. Like, you should not be in the bottom 7 of the league 5-on-5 with the current roster you have.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Like, when you have a power play that's this lethal, and you obviously have the goalie that you do, all you need is just good 5-on-5 play, and I don't see why this team can't be a contender. And I feel like a lot of the moves you have right now, they open up a lot of opportunities for a lot of different players, and we just got to hope that they take advantage of it. So we'll see what happens. Obviously we have a lot of time, until the season starts, and we'll see what happens. But there was definitely a lot more moves that happened, in free agency than expected, and honestly, a lot of them shocked me. Like, I thought, you said it right at the beginning. When we heard they were potentially signing Blake Wheeler, I thought they were signing him and we wouldn't have any money left because they were going to give him like $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
So I genuinely believe that. So thankfully he's literally on league minimum. Obviously there's the bonuses involved and what have you, but the pure value, like I know he's 37 and I keep trying to hammer this home. I don't think he's going to be Connor McDavid. I know it sounds like I'm trying to to make that a reality. Like, I don't think that at all. But a 50-point player on 800K is something I don't think has happened before. So I think that could potentially be one of just the best value signings that happened at free agency. So assuming everything goes right, this team, I mean, like I keep saying, there's no way they're not in the playoffs, right? Mm-hmm. Like, just absolutely no way. Like, there's no way that there's no way that the Blue Jackets will just all of a sudden become a playoff team with
Mike Babcock-led Blue Jackets.
Yeah, like the Flyers are they're the Flyers. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just no way. Like, the two teams. Now, granted, the two teams that did finish above the Rangers in the standings got better. Mm-hmm. So that is the one negative I will say in this episode.
You got to be very happy to be third.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a little scary because both of them definitely improved, but the Devils still don't have a goalie. So I mean, mm-hmm. assuming that let's say they run into each other in the playoffs again, assuming that the top players simply just do the thing, you should be able to win. Because they literally had to pull their goalie in like 85% of their playoff games. So obviously they have one of the best forward groups in the league. I understand that. I understand we lost to them. I get it. Just in case any Devils fans somehow find this and come at me. I understand. You can have your piece of cake. I get it. But they still don't have a goalie. And just assuming that things don't go catastrophically wrong again, I'm not necessarily terrified of them, which mm-hmm. might sound stupid to say, but I I think they're trying to talk themselves into Akira Schmid being the answer, and I think that's definitely not it. So we'll see what happens. I mean, if now granted, if they do get a goalie, they are a serious problem. Okay,
oh, God.
but I mean, we'll see what happens. I just think if they were going to get a goalie, it probably would have happened by now, or at least we would have heard something. Obviously, we have a lot of offseason left, but also, I mean, it would take at least a year, I'd assume, for Hellebuck to be there if that were going to happen. And the only other option for a big name would be John Gibson, and I'm not terrified of him. And also we have Igor Shesterkin.
Yeah.
So assuming you help him, I'm not scared of any other goalie. You know what I'm saying? Like it is what it is. Like there's no way that if they get John Gibson, I'm going to be like, oh man, like I don't want. I'm terrified of this goalie matchup in the playoffs. Like I would take Igor 10 times out of 10. I'm sure everybody would. So just assuming he gets the help, that's all we're asking. Just help the goalie. That's it.
It's only a question that's been asked ever since Mr. Henrik Lundqvist became a goaltender.
Yeah. By the way, we have not mentioned yet that he is in the Hall of Fame. Congratulations to him. That is absolutely my number one sports idol in my life. So I just wanted to give obviously him his praise, and I just want to say I can't believe there was any debate on whether he should be in or not.
That was the dumbest conversation.
There was legitimate arguments going on the internet about it. Like if you want to just be a Rangers hater and say he shouldn't be first ballot, which I absolutely disagree with, I'll at least just let you have your little hissy fit about it. Mm-hmm. But to say he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame at all is just, I mean, at that point you just hate the Rangers. That's cool. I understand. I have many players that I hate. Right. I have many teams that I hate. I get it, but I'll at least admit it. Mm-hmm. Don't try to make it seem like, oh, I'm not being biased. He's legitimately not a Hall of Famer. You're literally not making sense. He is one of the best goalies of all time. The only thing he does not have is a Stanley Cup, and that is a team award. And by God, he tried, man. That's all I could say about it. He tried.
If you look at that early to mid 2010s Rangers team and say, you know why they didn't win the cup? Henrik Lundqvist. I'm sorry, you don't know puck. You don't. Yeah, you don't have the slightest idea.
The teammate he played the most games with in his career was Mark Stahl.
God damn it.
So, and the best player he played with, I guess if you want to talk talent wise, was either Gabrick or Rick Nash, and Rick Nash did nothing in the playoffs ever. So he got no help, man. His two centers were Derek Stepan and Brassard. Now, they are both legends in my heart. That was my childhood team. Yep. I'm not trying to talk shit about them, but it's physically not possible to win a cup when those are your top two centers. I'm sorry. It's just not, especially when you were playing against the Kings as good as they were at the time. It just wasn't going to happen. There was just no way. I mean, like I said, I just cannot believe that people genuinely were upset when he got in and there was any amount of discourse about it. Though, one other thing, I know a lot of people won't care about this, but I do. Listen, Henrik Lundqvist beat Team Canada when they actually sent players to try to win. They actually went all out and sent their best available players. He single-handedly beat them. I would make the argument that is more impressive than winning a Stanley Cup, to be honest with you. I mean, come on. He literally played against one of the best hockey rosters ever assembled and won. Now, I know a lot of people don't care about international play, but that guy's, obviously second best European goalie ever if you don't want to put him first. I'd put him first just because I'm biased and I will openly admit that, but when you're talking about the Hall of Fame, you gotta the guys who go in are for the most part, or at least the first ballot guys, are essentially guys that you can't tell the story of the NHL, so to speak, without, right? He has left a huge legacy behind him. like I said, the only thing he's missing is a Stanley Cup. That's it. I don't know why there was such a huge debate about it, and I hope so many people were just crying when he got in, because I know so many people were probably very excited to rag on everybody if he didn't get in. But like I said, I just wanted to at least have a little segment where we just talked about that, because he is forever probably going to be my number one athlete, like in my childhood. So I just wanted to give him his props and all that stuff.
I think the only other European goaltender who I would put ahead of Henrik is probably Hasek.
Yeah, like those are the only two.
But
they
it's
are
him.
in the same stratosphere as each other. Those are the only two that are in the same sentence, you know. So whether you want to put, doesn't matter who you put, one or two. There's no way that Hank isn't a Hall of Famer. There's literally no way.
The biggest thing I have, if you say Carey Price is a Hall of Famer, you physically cannot say Henrik isn't.
Yeah, Hank beat him twice, by the way. So, or once. I mean, you know. So what?
Like,
if Habs fans still want to keep crying about the injury that happened in the conference finals, go ahead. But Hank beat him after that. So I don't know what else. Yeah, kind of put that to bed when that happened. So,
the fact that was an actual argument. I thought it was a meme at first. Like, I read it and kept scrolling. I was like, wait a minute.
yeah,
go back up.
Oh man,
Jesus Christ,
I cannot believe it. Like, it just his accomplishments, and he was considered the best goalie in the world for many years. Like, I don't understand how you could possibly be like, oh, he was just. And the other thing too is people try to make
I know where you're going.
People try to make it seem like he had such a good team in front of him. Like specifically, Habs fans try to compare Price and Lundqvist, and they're both great goalies. I get it. I understand. But like, Habs fans try to make it seem like Hank was playing with Team Canada in front of him. He never had anything close to that. Like, not even remotely close. Like, Hank literally, honestly, truthfully, never had a like actual elite superstar on his team. Never. Like, ever.
I love McDonough. Very, very special player to a lot of Rangers fans, and I'm not saying this as any form of slander. Do you know what Henrik Lundqvist would have done with a defenseman like PK Subban for any length of time?
Yeah,
with
like in
a
his
Shea
prime,
Weber for any length of time. I'm sorry. Not only did Price have better forwards, he had better defensemen than Hank did. Like, people saying, well, of course he had better numbers. He had a better defense. What sport did you watch?
Dude, Hank won the Vezina with Michael Roosevelt and Michael Del Zotto on his team. Like, I don't understand. Like, there was, and not only that, like, he literally brought this team back to relevance.
Yep.
Like, they were terrible before he got there. Like, they were so bad, and they were still bad when he was there, but he just wasn't allowing goals. So, like, I don't know. There's so many things. I will defend that man till the day I die. I just wanted to at least have, like, a few minutes where we just put all the haters to sleep on him, because there's no way that anybody genuinely believes that. Like,
are you
like
saying that Anton Strollman and Stu Bickel weren't elite defensive players in front of?
Oh my! Oh Jesus! Like, I'm just so happy that he got in on his first eligible year, and it was first ballot. Like, all of that just makes me so happy, because so many people were just so upset about it. Like so many people were literally crying on the internet about it.
Listening to the people weep about it was so fulfilling in my heart of hearts.
Yeah, like, I don't know, man. Just thankfully that happened. Other than that, I think we're pretty much all set. I don't have too much else to say. I will probably hop back on. I guess when Laugh gets his contract, and we'll kind of just fully evaluate everything. We could also talk about, you know, once all the moves have pretty much shaken out with the NHL, we'll just, you know, do something about that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty solid. I think I've said everything I've wanted to say, and probably a little bit more. So
Yeah, I'm feeling content, so we will reconvene here in a few weeks, or whenever the Lafreniere contract is official and done. But until then,
Thank you all so very much for tuning into the 12th episode of the Rangers Game Plan Podcast. Until next time, I'm Weston, and go Rangers.
Go Rangers.